The Substance Abuse Coalition has been around actually since 2000, so we've been around a long time. It's made up of about 280 people now who are just focused on what does substance abuse look like in McHenry County and how do we curb that so that we don't have as many issues later in life. And so today I have with me Northwestern as a representative here, medical, and the Lake and the Hills PD. Because we really feel like, especially in vaping, this is a conversation that's going on in many realms. And so it's important for you to hear from different experts. So.
Hello, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and pass the mic on. I'm Judy Pasternak from Northwestern Medicine. I work at all three hospitals as a nurse educator for substance abuse and behavioral health. And I'll be chatting with you about midway through the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Officer Carson from Lake and the Hills Police. I've been a police officer for 16 and a half years, 15-ish on midnight shift. So if you don't recognize me, it doesn't mean I'm not around, but I have been around. I do work day shift now. I do recognize a few faces here. And so, like Lori said,
that sounds really good. I'll bring that
good thing. It's a good thing. Anyway, let's talk. I knew you looked familiar. All right, so we're going to talk about vaping. Again, this is more information for everybody. There's no judgment here. This is a new thing. Does everybody remember smoking? Well, smoking was good for everybody. We determined it wasn't, or the Surgeon General determined it wasn't, and that was a big step. This is education, this is information for you guys. We're going to talk about things. Why don't you go ahead? There you go.
Vaping is like safer than. Vaping is safer than.
Okay, so that's a video from thetruth.com. They're pretty accurate about that. So, what is vaping? Does anybody know what vaping is? We don't know a lot about it. That's the problem. E-cigarettes and pens, as we'll refer to them, make large clouds that make people think that it's just water vapor, and it's not. The cloud is a mixture of very different chemicals, and when you superheat something up in a small device that charges at that metal, there's other things, other substances that come off of those things, and we just don't know what all those chemicals are and how bad they are for you. So it's not like an aerosol, and it's not just water vapor. It's something totally different. We talk about electronic nicotine device systems, or we refer to them as ENDS. Lori, my Vanna, will show you some of these as we talk, but if you start on the left side, it looks like a regular cigarette on the left side over there. And this is how they've matured and changed. And so the purple one in the middle there, that has a chamber you can put your substance in there, whether it be juice, nicotine, or other substances in there. It superheats it up, and you get that discharge into your mouth that goes into your body. The mod, the bigger one in the middle, those are the ones that you see all the fancy smoke things and everything like that. They create a lot of smoke, where some of these other ones would create absolutely no smoke. The one on the end, the Juul, some of them are almost smokeless now. So how does the vape work? This is a pretty good picture. It tells you, this is an older one. So the end of the cigarette's going to light up, all right? There's usually a battery in there that superheats everything. Then you have your little container or your module that you put your product in. It superheats it, puts it into the vapor, and then you inhale it into your mouth and it goes out. And most all of them operate and work on the same premise. Obviously they're a little bit different when you get into different devices and things like that, but that's the main premise of it. So you're superheating chemicals near your face. What could go wrong? And again, no judgment here. I used to smoke cigarettes. Does everybody smoke cigarettes? It's the same thing as sucking on the tailpipe of a car. It's carcinogenic, it causes cancer. What could possibly go wrong if we put this stuff up near our face? We don't know. You're putting out, look at Samsung people have phones, they weren't letting them on the plane for a while. Why was that? Because they were having problems with those lithium batteries. They were having problems with knowing what was going to happen with those things. This is the same exact thing. That lithium battery there can explode in your face. What's going to happen then? I think we might have some other issues at that point in time. So these are the chemicals that we know that come off of a vaping device. The ones in red we know are dangerous. These are the ones that we know about. Again, because vaping is so new, because it is so cutting edge, there's not a lot of regulation on them. I don't want any of those things that are not in red on me or in me, but those are all the ones that we know are carcinogenic and cause cancer.
And this is from the FDA, and so the FDA has qualified these for ingestion. So they haven't ever tested what things are when they're inhaled. So while this is the list for ingestion, where we have a filtering system in our body and we can get rid of things and we can clean things up, we don't have that capability in our lungs. So they're now in the process of testing all these different chemicals again and seeing what the impact is on inhalation, which is what we'd be more concerned about.
And we worry about inhalation because if someone's going to be using this device to smoke or get high, that's why nicotine is so popular, because you get the greatest high from that stimulant from the nicotine. Smoking is the fastest way to get high in your body. So almost all vaping products contain nicotine. There's nicotine salt and free-base nicotine, which I'll let Judy talk about a little bit more. But is everybody familiar with the Juul pods? How big are those? Those are pretty tiny. Those would be pretty easy to conceal if I was a student or maybe an adult that's not supposed to be smoking on a property or something like that. One of those pods is the equivalent to one pack of cigarettes, 20 cigarettes. Now, smoking is by itself very easy to do, but there's a process involved in it. What's that process? I have to physically get up. I have to retrieve my pack of cigarettes, make sure I have a lighter. Then I have to go outside. If it's cold out, I gotta put my jacket on. Then I have to go out there. Then I'm gonna open the pack of cigarettes. I'm gonna remove the cigarette. I'm gonna put it in my mouth. I'm gonna put the pack of cigarettes away. Then I'm gonna get my lighter out and I'm gonna try to light my cigarette. There's a whole process there involved in that. We physically know that we're doing it. How easy is it to take something out and go and be done? So if you smoke one pack a day or you smoke one pack a week, one of those pods, depending on how much you're vaping, because of how easy it is, how many packs of cigarettes are you now ingesting? And this was originally marketed by vaping companies and by Juul to say, hey, this will help you quit smoking. But all those pods have nicotine in them. There's a 3-pack pod, and now there's going to be a 5-pack pod. So imagine if you're going through a pod a day or even a pod a week, and you didn't ever smoke before. What have we done to ourselves? What are we accomplishing? Can anybody describe what these devices on the right look like? Flash drives, technology. Kids like this because it looks like technology, and parents don't know that that's not technology. That looks like a flash drive. You guys think it looks like a flash drive. We have examples up here on the board that you don't know. If you're not looking at it and you're not in your kids' stuff and you're not in their backpack and you're not in their coat, look at that stuff, see what it is. If you have a question about it, ask them about it, confront them on it. If you're still not sure, call us, we'll come by and tell you. Oh, hang on.
So Adam mentioned free-base nicotine, and so I want to talk just a little bit about the difference between some of the other vaping equipment and Juuls. So if someone is trying to quit smoking, then you should be using this version or this version, where you're adding liquid that's considered free-base nicotine. So in the process, they basically just wash it out the best they can, and they give you a fluid that still has nicotine in it. That's what free-base nicotine is. What's in these pods is concentrated nicotine salt. So they take all the nicotine down to its barest essential, so all you have is the little salts that are all nicotine, then they suspend them again in liquid. So what this does is it acts more like a cigarette. So tobacco comes in and just stays in your system. Some of the early research that we're seeing is that this free-base nicotine at least comes in like a cigarette and then tapers. So it's that tapering off that allows you to start quitting. And the salt is staying at this level. Vaping as a whole is relatively new. Think about how long it took us to learn what we learned about cigarettes before it was bad. We can make some strong predictions based on what we know about nicotine. Juji's going to talk about diacetyl, and we know what happens with that. And so we can make some predictions, but we really won't know until this has been popular for about 10 more years. And so what they're showing right now with this nicotine salt is that it may be equal to or higher than a pack of cigarettes because it never tapers off. Even a regular cigarette does. So that's kind of the other thing. Juuls are what kids are using most of the time because they are hidden, right? And so that hiding is a huge piece of the problem. We establish, Judy's going to talk about addiction, but we also establish our behavior patterns when we're young. So these are designed to be tucked, to be hidden. So we start a behavior in our kids that if it's something that maybe someone else isn't going to like, we hide it, we cover it up. Long term in their life, that behavior pattern stays with them. So you want to be looking at both components, not just what is it this way, but also behaviorally, we're setting them up to say, if you know it's not good for you, or if it's not something, hide it. Well, if they ever do have a long-term addiction, what have we taught them to do? So that's another piece of this that we're concerned about.
So I'm going to give you the science lesson. And I'm going to start by talking about the brain. So your kids' brains right now are a work in progress. The brain doesn't fully develop. Does anybody know the age that a brain basically fully develops? Anybody have an idea? 30. So up until the age of 30, and I thought I was an adult at 21, and I am 21 now, so I think I'm an adult. So I thought I was making adult decisions, and I don't think it was really till I was about 35 that I really started making adult decisions. So if you look back, if you're as young as I am, if you look back, you'll realize, yeah, I was still kind of making some interesting decisions in my 20s. So the problem with most drugs, and nicotine in particular, is it touches all areas of the brain. And what the brain is doing, other than absorbing knowledge at this age, and Lori began to speak about it, is it's building pathways and patterns. And those pathways are going to last for life. So by the time you're 30, the pathways that you're building now, and they could include addiction pathways, are going to stick. And I'm going to show you a slide towards the end of my part of the talk that's going to show you how important it is that nicotine not be a player in this brain development. So a couple of things are going on when you use any kind of a substance. And one of the things that's going on is something called dopamine. So dopamine is what we call the reward chemical. Your brain makes all these different chemicals and pumps them out into your system. Dopamine is our reward chemical. So it's the one that tells you, for instance, you go to a casino and you go to a 2-cent machine and you're putting in $1 at a time and you're getting 2 cents back, but there's all those bells and whistles, so you do it again. And then you do it again. And at the end, you're down $50 and you go, but I got a couple of 2-cent hits, right? It's dopamine. Those bells and whistles are designed to trigger your dopamine, to keep you going. It's not different with drugs. What you're looking at here is on this side here, that is the amount of dopamine, those little yellow circles, if you can see them way in the back, I don't know. They are what happens when we eat something we like. Now look at the next side, that's when we use cocaine. How many more yellow circles do you see there? And it's not really different with nicotine. So one thing that's happening is we're learning we like a reward, and we're going to keep going because the reward is there. Nicotine is indeed a substance. It is a stimulant. It is giving a reward, and it is triggering dopamine. I don't know about you guys, but I like French fries. I hope you guys didn't skip dinner, because then this slide wouldn't be fair. But most of us like French fries, right? So before I even talk about why this slide is here, because it has nothing to do with vaping whatsoever, theoretically, right? Is talk about tolerance and addiction. So addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease. That means once you have it, just like you contract any other disease, just like if we eat a lot, over time there's some people who are born with a tendency to diabetes, and other people it's obesity that gives them that tendency towards diabetes, right? So just like that, and once you have it, it's chronic, meaning it doesn't go away, right? And relapse, we all know what that means, right? It's going to happen again and again. So addiction builds. It builds over time, and it is a chronic disease. There's another piece, which is dependence. Dependence is the body believing it needs something to function. So that's why you can quit smoking. You can convince your body it doesn't need nicotine anymore, for those of you who've quit. You don't have to raise your hands, but I'm sure some of you have quit and then relapsed. It's that craving piece. That's the dependence or the tolerance piece, right? So your body, you can take away the substance, but you can't take away the craving. It comes back, and it comes back in funny ways sometimes. Well, I'm also going to talk about tolerance, because tolerance is why you can start with a jewel pack of 1 pack. Now you're going to need a jewel pack of 3 packs, and ultimately you might want that jewel pack of 5 packs. And that is because of tolerance. So going back to these French fries, we all like them. But if I told you that they were unsalted, some of us don't like salt, but if I told you they were unsalted and they were fried at McDonald's in yesterday's filet of fish oil, are you going to eat these? Me too. I probably would, but I probably wouldn't love them. So you're really not going to want them. So what do you need? You want some salt. And even if there's that awful rancid oil in them, the salt's going to make it better, right? So that's the beginning of using a substance, right? Something is made better, dopamine gets released, right? But what happens over time is that's not enough. So that's what happens. You need more and more and more and more to get to the same place. So that reward, that dopamine that pops out when somebody vapes, and you go like, yeah, I needed that nicotine, I'm feeling much better. That dopamine isn't going to release again for the same amount of nicotine over time. It's more and more and more. That's just the reality. No matter whether you're a child or an adult, you're going to build tolerance to certain chemicals, and nicotine is one of them. So this slide that I found just bugs me, but I want to share it with you. And it shows for 3 different kinds of drugs, and by age. If you start at what age are you most likely to be addicted as an adult to something? And what's our #1 drug on that, for those of you who can see it? Nicotine. You're more likely to become somebody who abuses substances or is dependent on something if you start with nicotine, and the younger you start, 14, that's more likely than if you drink alcohol, that's more likely than if you use other illicit drugs. Nicotine is the #1 culprit in building that craving, that tolerance, and that addiction. So, something to think about. I think what is it? It's still me? It's still me. So, what happens in the body? Yeah, I got a lot to go. So what happens in our bodies? Remember, it's a stimulant. So, we're adults, we make adult decisions, theoretically, all the time. But our kids don't make adult decisions, and they're not thinking about all the stuff that's happening to your body when you're using nicotine. So one thing is it makes your heart beat faster. It's a stimulant, right? So a young body, heart can beat pretty fast, pretty hard. Recovery's pretty good for most kids, right? But over time, if you're still addicted to nicotine in your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s, that's why smokers have cardiac problems. Part of that is the nicotine, right? You have trouble breathing. And as Lori's begun to point out, we've all begun to point out, this is not really vapor, this is aerosol. Has anybody heard the term huffing? So, putting glue in a bag and breathing it in, breathing in deodorant, stuff like that. This is kind of more like huffing. It's not huffing, but it's kind of more like that. So you're going to have some trouble with your lungs. And you're even going to have GI problems with your stomach. Because everything's moving fast, there's no time to digest, the food's moving too fast, everything's going fast. Going back here for a second, if your kids are playing sports and they go for that physical and their hearts are racing, they're not going to play this year, right? Or they're going to need another physical, and if they're continuing to vape, that heart rate's going to still be up. So something to think about. I'm going to talk about popcorn lung for a second. Has anybody heard this term before? Okay, so I would like to start out by saying we have some suspected cases, but the evidence is still out. This is such a young product and such a young science. Evidence takes forever, right? So what we know, though, is there were a couple of factories, one in Texas, one in Indiana. And in those two factories, they made microwave popcorn. And that microwave popcorn is flavored. It gets its butter flavor from a chemical that Lori mentioned, diacetyl. And diacetyl wasn't even on that list that we showed you earlier of the chemicals in red, because it's safe to ingest. That's why they use it in microwave popcorn. You can eat it, it's fine, it processes. We don't know what it's going to do yet, but we do know diacetyl does affect the lungs if it's inhaled. So all these young factory workers were getting these symptoms that look like COPD. You know what COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, you know, the people who are walking around with the oxygen. You may even have people in your family who are oxygen dependent, COPD, right? So all these people like in their 20s and 30s were getting what looked like COPD. And it turned out it was what they call popcorn lung. It sort of mimics that. It's a scarring of the bronchioles. It causes the lungs not to expand properly, and over time, you can't breathe. So people who get this thing that we know definitely happened in the factories, basically are oxygen dependent forever. And I looked it up. I'm a nurse, I have to look things up. The only cure is basically a lung transplant. So that's something we want, right? Our concern is we don't know yet, but we do know that diacetyl is in a lot of these flavors that the kids are vaping. It's a butter flavor. It's also used for caramel flavoring. And you know, they'll always tell you, oh, it's not in anything I use because I use strawberry or whatever. My son is 23. He was a vapor until recently. And he'll still tell me, it's only if there's butter flavor in it. He's wrong. So even at 23, those adult decisions, right? So we know that this is a big concern. There's a couple of suspected cases, but no absolute proof. We're working on that, but I don't want to find out the hard way that this is causing popcorn lung. And I will pass it to Lori. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to let you know pretty much everything we've talked about up through the marketing component is stuff that your kids will hear on Wednesday. And we'll get into the last part of the presentation is kind of the part why we said it's better if kids aren't here, so that you guys hear some information you should be aware of. But we spend quite a bit of time talking about the marketing component. And the reason is when tobacco cigarettes came out, they were marketed to kids all the time, right? To youth. We had, you know, good-looking men and women. When Juuls first started coming out, they were doing the same marketing. And the reason was originally, right, it all came out as there's no nicotine in these, right? There's no nicotine. So they didn't have to market or adhere to tobacco laws that are about marketing to kids. So they came out with these images, they came out with this. What was really going on is the FDA said you have to have this much nicotine in and then you got to put a label on it. So vapes came in here. So they didn't have to label. As of August of last year, that has changed. And so you'll see over the next year and a half, all the marketing components should be changing. And one of them is they're eliminating this. But they target kids because of this pathway that's developed. If you develop a pathway in a child, right, who's using it, and I can tell you, my youngest daughter's 21, she has a large group of friends who vape. Oh, they're all quitting at the end of college. They're not all gonna quit at the end of college. They're gonna be lucky if any of them quit at the end of college. But that's what they think. So they want to establish this. It used to be that Juul companies in particular, but vaping companies in general, were owned by private owners. Almost all of the primary ones are now owned by Big Tobacco. They purchased out and they are big key players in this. And it's really important to know that because they're using all the same strategies, right? And so marketing to kids is still there. I started smoking when I was 12 years old. I established that. I was 27 when I quit. It's amazing, you wake up coughing up blood. It's a good time to quit. And I wasn't a heavy smoker. I was 1 to 2 packs a week, varying. But for me, my predisposition was to have a problem. When I was 44 years old, I was at my uncle's funeral. I had 1 cigarette, and I spent 35 to 45 days going, I could get a pack, I could put it in my glove compartment. Nobody would know, I wouldn't use them that often. All those same things happened because I had that established pattern. And they know that. That's why they market to them. So they market to them. We talked about the technology look, right? This is because this is familiar. This is home to them. It is also something they know parents and adults are not as familiar with, so they can explain it away easier. This was very intentional. The first Juul was designed by a man who worked for Apple, and he did it on purpose because he said this will be good for people who are younger. So Juul stands for Juicing USB Lighting System. That's what it stands for. It is a company called Juul, but it also represents all the generic Juul versions. So if they USB charge, they all fall under that. So that was one way. Flavoring was the other way. A lot of these are flavors that adults use. I try really hard to investigate with people who do vape, why you're vaping, what's good about it, what do you feel like it's working, whatever. And adults will tell me they use vape and they use flavored vape. But almost everybody I talked to who started vaping as an adult did not start with cherry flavored. They tend to start with tobacco flavors, especially if they're trying to quit. They go to the tobacco or the menthol or something like that. You can actually find like, this is more like a Camel versus a Marlboro when you go searching. But the flavors started to be designed for kids. This is where the diacetyl comes in when you start to add these flavors to oils, right? And very few, there's about 30,000 flavors out now for vaping, about 30,000 of them. Less than 1% of them have no nicotine. All the rest do. So you want to know that about your product. Chicken and waffles, anybody? Chicken and waffles? I can tell you, I spend sometimes a little too much time playing online looking at these things. You can get an entire Thanksgiving meal in your vape. Turkey, mashed potatoes with or without gravy, your choice, apple, cherry, pumpkin pie. You can get it all. And bake your whole Thanksgiving meal. So, it's out there. And advertised that way, I'm going to tell you it was. But here's what we're doing to kids. Don't know about you guys, I had 3 kids. Those things went in their lunchbox. They went with them to sporting games. So marketing strategy. The psychology of marketing is crazy to read about, but what they do is they want to take whatever product they have, tie it to a time that you felt either free, safe, warm, or secure. If they can do that, they own you, because that's the product you're going to turn to. So this, again, even for adults, I'm not gonna lie, my favorite cereal was Trix. If I was going to choose to vape, I'd probably try the Trix because that's what I liked when I was a kid. It's what our strategy is, and we tell kids, this isn't just you who are developing, right? This is adults, we're doing the same thing. But none of those are things that we would have probably as an adult looked to if we were gonna vape and say, I'm gonna start with Trix. I'm gonna do my apple juice that I had as a kid. But for kids, this allows it to be connected to things that they're already familiar with, and mom had in the cabinet, so it's gotta be okay. That developmental part of the brain isn't there for them to connect and to say, wait a minute, this isn't the box of cereal in mom's cabinet, right? It's just what it is. And this is, and I'm telling you, 30,000 flavors. I can find any brand of candy, I can find any brand of cereal. Popcorn for the movie theaters, it even looks like the AMC signs on it, the Regal signs on it. It's pretty amazing what's out there. These things aren't expensive. So when they market this, you can purchase it on Amazon. You can purchase it on most websites that sell any of these products. And I would tell you, all but one company, I always give them a shout out because they were so good. Miles was the only site I was on that actually verified that I was over 18. Every other site, you just answer a button that says, yep, I'm 18, and I can purchase any product I want. That particular company actually asked me for my birth date, my last four, my social, my full name, and then they did it, and then I was like, oh, that's probably a gimmick. So I went back and tried to order a second time, and I changed my 4 digits, and it wouldn't let me order. So whatever screening process they have in place is actually working. But Amazon, every company I looked at outside of that one, it hit 18. The other thing they started to do is they changed some things. So now you can use a debit card to make your purchases on some of the sites, not Amazon, but others. So you can use a debit card. So if you have a savings account with your child, they can swipe their debit card and give that account number, and they can purchase from their savings account. You can use PayPal. My kids had access to my PayPal because they would purchase school books and stuff like that, so I never even would have thought to check my PayPal account in this way. It was very easy for kids to access. So that's another way they started to make it easier for kids. So, one of the big concerns is, what is this really meaning? Because we're hearing kids have stopped smoking or people have stopped smoking. We had gotten to a point in McHenry County where in a middle school, 2% or less would initiate any type of tobacco, whether that was chewing or smoking a traditional cigarette. What we see now is we see somewhere in the neighborhood of 25% of middle school kids, 40% of high school kids who have started to vape. And vape regularly, not just an experimental. And so this nicotine that they don't think is in there is the same thing as a cigarette. They learned their lesson about that. They seem to get it. As a matter of fact, I've been doing this now for about 12 years. And if you ask a group of kids, the most dangerous thing out there is a cigarette. Not pot, not alcohol, definitely not vaping. And so we have to get them reconnected. So that's what we're going to be doing on Wednesday, is trying to reconnect them to some of the information they already know and tie it to this. Because for every kid who starts vaping, now what we're seeing is they're 4 times more likely to also go to traditional cigarettes as well. So they're smoking both now. And so that is changes that we don't want to see. We had gotten very successful at keeping kids from starting. So this is pretty much the presentation we would give to kids. And we're going to move into some stuff about cannabis, and that's why we didn't have you come here. So there's a process by where sometimes with kids you introduce them to a concept that they didn't know about, and this is one we didn't want to introduce to kids. That was one of the reasons we didn't want kids present, and we don't talk about it with kids. But what we are going to talk about right now, I have to run across, is dab. How many people are familiar with dab at all? A few hands going up. All right, so do you want to take over or you want to, okay.
Whatever.
All right, so THC, when we were growing up, 5% maybe in a joint that you would have, 8 if you got something really good, but that would be about it. On the street right now, that same joint is about 30% THC. And so where people used to say you can't get addicted to marijuana, we absolutely see that cannabis and marijuana are a situation that we're seeing in treatment centers. 2 years ago, Rosecrans, one of our largest agencies, right, we asked them about their youth. 80% of the kids that were in treatment, so we're talking inpatient type of treatment settings, 80% of them under the age of 18 were for cannabis only. Not alcohol, not other substances, cannabis only. So we know that that's addictive, and especially that 30%. Dab is this liquid, this butter, this purified THC. 85 to 95% pure THC. All the signs and symptoms, and I'm gonna let Adam do a little bit on signs and symptoms that you would see for regular kind of using a joint marijuana, is nothing like 85 to 95% pure THC. And it's out there. The CDC did a study, 20,000 kids, and asked who was vaping. What they found was 1 in 8 kids was vaping at that time. It was about 1.5 years ago. Of those vaping, 1 in 3 was vaping cannabis and not vaping oils and other things. So the way to vape it is this purified form. And so at 90%, you're talking a whole different concern level about the pathway, about how it presents itself, and it can come in all these different forms.
What does that picture at the upper left look like to you guys?
Cookie dough.
Cookie dough? Okay. Looks like cookie dough. Anybody else got anything else?
Earwax.
Earwax. If you see this on a toothpick or a toothbrush, as we have found, there are dental picks. That's probably super concentrated THC. Does everybody understand what THC is when we talk about cannabis? Tetrahydrocannabinol is the active, psychoactive part of the cannabis plant that gets you high. What they do is they'll take all the green plant material and they'll put it in a tube, a glass cylinder, and they'll fill it up with butane. And they'll take the cap off, and all the THC on that green plant comes out and put it in a bag or in a dish or on some parchment paper or some wax paper. And so all the green plant material that you smoke with, that the reason you get 30% THC is because there's other parts of that plant in there. With the enhanced versions of it, you're getting a lot more THC. You're getting 80, 85, 90. We just seized 25 vape pods this past weekend that were all 90+% THC. So when you look at the physical signs and symptoms of people that are smoking weed back in the 60s and 70s, everyone was happy and very lackadaisical and everything like that. You're seeing people have seizures. You're seeing people have heart attacks, kids having heart attacks, and we can't explain it. When you start talking about edibles and things like that, we don't know how much THC is in a gummy bear. We don't know how much THC is in that cookie that they're getting. So we need to be very careful with that. If it looks like the stick on the end here, that kind of looks like motor oil. When they have it in that, put in a little jelly jar, or we have an example of what they will hide it in up there. So it's a super concentrated thing. The signs and symptoms we look at are just off the chart. They're just, people are unable to sit still. It almost acts like a stimulant now. Cannabis is classified as a hallucinogen because of its properties. However, when you're changing the chemical structure of that, we're seeing different things. Does that answer about signs and symptoms and everything like that?
What would they look for?
So if you see somebody if you suspect that somebody's under the influence of cannabis, the best thing that I look for is that red, glassy, bloodshot eye. That's the first thing I look for. Does anybody not know what cannabis smells like? It has a skunky, pungent smell. It's pretty unique. With the vapes, you can't smell it because they're taking that chemical out of it. So if their kids are vaping THC or they're vaping something else, you can't smell that. You won't be able to smell the cannabis smell off of it. Thing that we look for, have them tilt their head back and close their eyes. Watch their eyelids. If there's eyelid tremors or flutters going on, that's one of the side effects of it. It's an uncontrollable thing that happens to the body. That's one of the signs and symptoms that we look for, or that I look for as a police officer. Called Cheeto fingers. They can't stop moving. Just a nervous twitch. Leg shakes, leg tremors, arm tremors. Tilt their head back and close their eyes. Watch their throat. You'll see the pulsations in their throat. That's when they're going to be high. Now, is that all going to happen? No. Will none of it happen? Maybe. But those are the kinds of signs and symptoms that we look for. That's about all I got on that. Does anybody have anything about vapes?
I have a quick question. You were talking about the symptoms, like tremors and whatnot. Is that somebody smoking just like a regular joint versus, or is that somebody that's doing more higher concentrated stuff?
Okay, so the question was, are we looking for those signs and symptoms? Are they going to be with someone that's smoking a regular joint, or if it's going to be a higher concentration? Usually everything with the concentrations are going to be magnified. But again, because it's so different, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Everybody's body reacts differently to drugs. Everybody's body reacts differently. Everyone's got that family member that can't hold their alcohol at the family party, right? And they start dancing on the kitchen table, you know, halfway through the Thanksgiving dinner. Been there, I've seen it, trust me. Guys, laugh. It happens. But so alcohol reacts differently to everybody. Same thing with the drugs. So if you have a tolerant user, someone who's using nicotine all the time, who's using THC all the time, or whatever they're using, your body develops a tolerance like Judy talked about, and that baseline has changed. So if I get into a higher concentration of THC, we've had people, there's documented cases, not locally, but where people have overdosed on cannabis and jumped out a window because they're hallucinating because of that high concentration. So those signs and symptoms are usually magnified. The big thing that I'm going to see is those eyelid tremors. That's what I'm going to look for. That's going to be one of the big clues that I'm going to have. Now again, when I do things, I look at the totality of the circumstances. So if all I have is eyelid tremors, it's going to be hard for me to prove a case or develop anything. At that point in time, we're going to start looking for other things. If you find a vape pen, if you find an unlabeled pod, if you find other items that go along with it, then you can start building up your case here and figure out what's going on here. Anything else?
Is that something that gets loaded into one of those devices?
So when you're talking about, this is magnified many times. It's about the size, you just put a little dot on the end of a dental pick. So take a toothpick and just cover up the very end of it, and they'll put that in a vape or on a nail in a bong, and they'll superheat it. And because there's so much THC in there, that's all they need.
It's called dab for that reason. But words that you would hear possibly are wax. So wax pens. If someone's talking about a wax pen, it's cannabis. Oils, they'll call it. I mean, they'll call it hash still. You know, it's a hash oil or it's a whatever. But wax, butter, brittle, shatter are all words that kind of associate with this. Vaping in general, the one that we're hearing most dominantly out of kids is carts. I'm buying some carts or I'm picking up carts, and you might not even notice that in a conversation and think they're saying cards, but carts is the phrase that we're hearing associated with vaping. To give you an idea of cost, because that's probably something else I should say to you, you can get these now as low as $17.95 with a starter kit. So you get this plus 4 pods. More so in the high school, not very hard to get pods because you have some people who are still 18. When it goes tobacco 21, that'll help clean up some of the issue in the high school. But these pods, I can pick them up for about $2 a piece now. So compared to a pack of cigarettes, that's all they are. And they sell in a school for usually about $5 for someone who's underage. Again, they can go online and purchase them. It doesn't make a difference. So we played with the cannabis component of this. So this is something that can be purchased on the street, but legalized states also sell these products. I played on a lot of them. Only one of the ones I played on got to a point where I could actually ship it to Illinois. Now I didn't hit send and actually order it, but I got all the way through the ordering process. And it actually, when I got to that site, it said, "Oh, you're from Illinois, we can ship for free." And here's and those were coming in, this is the top of a vape, so they were coming in these kind of cylinders that would be filled with it, and then you just screw it onto your pen.
And that's where cards comes from cartridges.
Yeah. That full of cannabis at this 90%, we have up here like one that was confiscated from a school, that was 90.89% pure THC, $45. No shipping and handling, no tax, because I'm out of state. That's all it was.
So I have a high schooler, a sophomore, and I'm a super stalker. So Snapchat him on. So what I see the kids saying is cards usually means the campus.
Right.
Pods usually means, at Huntley at least, means jewel pods. And it is a marketplace on Snapchat.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's people, I thought, I'm like, oh, what are these spinach nuggets? oh, they're selling pot, you know,
Right.
nuggets of pot, all over Snapchat on any given day to purchase. So
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody does, but.
I always recommend if you aren't, get an adult who's in your life who the kid's willing to put on their Snapchat, because sometimes they don't want you on it. For me, it's my brother-in-law. He was on all mine because he watched it all the time, and they were like, oh, Uncle Jim doesn't care, but Uncle Jim called me all the time. This is on there, are you worried about it? I encourage you, Snapchat, the reason they like Snapchat is it goes away. So if you're not familiar with Snapchat, it comes up, it's up for 10 to 12, well now it's up to 20 seconds, and then it goes away. You can only review it twice, so if it's on their story, then it shows for 24 hours, but even that they can delete off and they can block and hide and do all of that.
On the story, so like it'll
Yeah.
come up on the pictures of the.
Because it's what they have available. It's their marketing strategy. You know, it's like, it'll come up and it'll say spinach nuggets, it'll say, you know, this one happens to be watermelon. And like Adam said, when this is smoked, it smells more like watermelon. It doesn't smell like cannabis. So passing it off as some other vape is pretty easy to do. So, other questions?
I have a question. With the electronic machines, you said, Adam, that you can just like pull it out of your pocket and smoke it. So it doesn't have to warm up or does it have to stay on? You can just literally pick it up like a pen and
Yes.
touch it and then start.
This is all that it is. Battery's in there, all you do is,
And that's it.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's how quick.
As long as it's been charged, and charges, it depends on how often you use it, can last up to 24 hours. So during the school day, so one of the things that we learned about, because we talk to the kids a lot, is there's a challenge. So first the challenge was to vape in your classroom and get a picture of it. Snapchat again, lovely. Then it became a challenge of, can you do it every class period throughout one day? So we have kids who are intentionally trying to vape in the schools, in classrooms without being caught. It's hard to catch this. You know, when we talk with staff and we train with staff, some of the things we talk about are kids should never have a book that can be upright, it has to be flat on the desk. So this is a hoodie string, and it's for vaping. So it goes into your hoodie, right? How many times do you see a kid with their hand in their pocket or chewing on their end? So this connects to a vape. When you suck on it, it activates the vape. The vape could be in your pocket, wouldn't even know. So they're designed for kids to be able to do them in the schools.
I'm sorry, Melissa.
Yeah, no.
So if it doesn't emit smoke or a vapor,
Mhm.
does it still like will your clothing smell? Or
It'll probably smell sweet with kids. Adam, I'll let you, but the sweetness is what I notice around my daughter's friends, is I can tell because they smell sweet.
like a can?
Yeah.
What do cigarettes smell like? They smell like cigarettes. They've taken that smell out of that as well, and so they have the flavors. So if you have watermelon flavor, or blueberry, or honey nut Cheerio flavor, or whatever flavor that's what it's going to smell like. It's not exactly like it, because I like my honey nut Cheerios, but at the same time, that's what you're going to smell. You're going to smell wintergreen or whatever flavor they have. Blueberry was really, really popular a few years ago. They had Voodoo Blueberry. I remember you could order that out of Michigan, and that's what would come here for a long time. You get this blue Voodoo blueberry, but that contained THC.
Do you want to add the regulations, like how it's developed and what's not?
So what are the regulations on these juices? Anybody know? Because I don't know. There is zero regulation on them,
Except for the nicotine now.
except for the nicotine. But if they're claiming it has no nicotine in it, and like we said, there's a hard time to get things through government processes and check it out. When you talk about THC, I can kind of educate you about that. The University of Iowa has a simulator where they let people smoke up and then drive the simulator to see how bad they drive. Federal regulations say that they can only use up to 6% THC. Well, we're getting 30% on the street. Do you think that's affecting the way that they're driving? Probably. So they're only able to test at 6%. We don't know what's in in these juices and in these pods and everything like that is not regulated. Medicine is regulated. You go to a pharmacy, it's regulated by the FDA. There's a lot of controls on it. There's zero control on these juices because I can just go online and buy it. And just like anything else, you can go buy medication online as well. There's no different, but we don't know what we're getting. When we go to Walgreens or CVS or wherever you go to get your prescriptions, we know that it's controlled. It's very well controlled. It's very well monitored. You had a question in the back, yes?
I'm just wondering what FDA is doing about this. You mentioned something about trials. Seem like the clinical trials that they will have in certain place, because this is becoming like over-the-counter products, and it's not an over-the-counter product. That children are going to get problems. So it's going to become a big problem.
Well, it's already there. So what most people will say is the FDA missed the ball on this one completely. They saw it coming, they knew it was coming. The FDA director recently stepped down. This was one of the components. It also had to do with some big pharma stuff that was going on with opioids that just also was not kind of handled. So the first thing the FDA did is they qualified the nicotine component, which makes it a tobacco product. Even if it's zero nicotine, it's now qualified as a tobacco product because the product itself is. So that was the first step. The second thing they're doing is they're trying to do tests and trials, not just through the FDA, but NIDA, which is the National, I'm going to get it off wrong now, NIDA. Institute of Drug, and they're doing a lot of the science, the brain science component for a lot of different things. But there's all these different agencies doing the testing. The problem is by the time we hear it, we're going to be 5 to 6 years out by the time they've done the studies, finished it, and gone on. So I think some of the things that are happening locally, and I say statewide locally, is the change to Tobacco 21, which moved every tobacco product up to 21. That starts July 1st. So that will help a little. Again, it's all going to be online. Kids can still get online and purchase these things. We are working with schools on a regular basis. We kind of say, oh, this is the road show. We go out quite a bit now and we talk, and people are understanding it. Talking to kids honestly about it. Whether you choose to share that one of the advances is cannabis is up to you as a parent. We don't share it, but we do talk to them about all the other risks. Some kids are getting it. I don't know how many, but we're trying. It's just going to take, regulations just take forever. It really needs to be a parent, community kind of focus if we want to hit it now.
When you talk to the kids and you give them this presentation, are you going to speak to them about legal consequences or school consequences that go along with being alive doing it?
We don't always talk about the school consequence other than to say that your school has a policy. In a middle school, it's easier for me than the high schools because the high schools all have very different policies. Most middle schools, it's like zero tolerance across the board. If you have the paraphernalia, if you have the item, we're not going to take the time to test it and figure out what it is. You're in trouble regardless at the highest level, which I'm glad middle schools do that. They also are not going to give your product back to you as a parent. Believe it or not, we have parents who go, well, can I just pick it up at the end of the day? No, you can't. Not in these schools anyway. There are schools that allow that. This district does not allow that, which is good. So, yeah, I mean, we talk with the kids a lot. What I found is some of the most influential stuff, talking to them because they hear everything in health class and they feel like, I already know it all, is the marketing. They really don't like the idea that adults are messing with them on purpose. Like, it's kind of, up with the man kind of thing. But they don't. So we spend a lot on that. We talk a lot about the pathways and the addiction. We don't really talk about gateway drugs anymore. We've kind of eliminated that from our vocabulary because we like the pathway development. We talk a lot about that. They do not see product. This board doesn't go with us to those. We just have the conversation and the image that we show about what they are. So it's this presentation, but at their level.
And I can only speak to this school. The students in this school know exactly what happens. At Marlowe, for possession, it's 1 day. So if we have a suspicion and we search their locker and even find a pod or a charger that goes to it, it's an automatic 1 day in-school suspension. If they're using it, even if it's 1 puff, so if there's a group of 3 kids and they each take 1 puff, they get 1 day for a use. And on the third offense, which believe it or not, we've had many students already reach that, we actually bring the Lake and Hills Police in, and we then start issuing citations. That's what we do at Marlboro, and the kids know it. It's very clear.
I see you back there, I'll get you in a second. Go ahead.
I know you said that you guys were using Marlowe. Is Camden going to get anything like this?
So we're discussing the student presentations because of the timing of the year. I think Mr. Litchfield is looking at doing something early next year, as well as Mr. Beeland is having conversations with high school.
You had one in the back.
I just wanted to share another thing
Yeah.
with the parents, is that a lot of the kids can't necessarily always get the mods or the action jewel, but they'll buy the pods,
Uh-huh.
and then they strip wires. So they'll strip the wire.
Interesting.
It
Adam's
is
listening.
just a wonder of information.
there.
Yeah.
You want to come up and say, what are you doing it?
I know, I'm so sorry. But the bottom of the jewel
Yep.
rod is what is.
Yeah, that's where it
So what
charges.
they'll do is they will put it up to the bottom,
Uh-huh.
and they'll put that on their mouth, dummies, and they'll plug it into something, and they can keep the stuff packaged. Yeah, so if you find a lot of wires stripped around your house, you could be like, why, oh, it's broken, and then you're like, no.
I'm
stuff
telling you,
there.
if their power could be harnessed
And
for
there's
good.
videos. So you just go on videos, or you can actually look.
Yep.
I'm telling you this because mine did it. So I looked at their, on their computer, I just went through the history of what they were looking up. And you
Yep.
can see YouTube videos easily on what to do.
Tell you, as a parent, go to YouTube, search all those words that you're afraid might be going on in your child's life, and see the videos that are available. And then, for example, there's a way to make dab at home, and it's shown on YouTube. And the products that you need are very easily accessible. So then you go to Amazon. One of the things, he talked about a glass cylinder, is a glass turkey baster. If you go and look at a glass turkey baster on Amazon, the things that show up below, like suggested or people buy, are things like butane and screens and filters. And I don't know about your turkey, but I don't use butane. So it's always a learning, between Amazon and YouTube as a parent, you can learn a lot.
Should I come across this? How do I know what it is? Are they labeled? I use label loosely.
All right, well, so some of the packaging will come like a blister pack. They'll have like a foil cover,
I mean, just the cartridge itself.
and a lot of them aren't labeled. Some of them are refillable now, so you can put your own flavor. If you want to mix blueberry and vanilla, you can put it in there. And if you're mixing something with something else, you don't know what those chemical combinations are going to be. You don't know what kind of effect it's going to have. Also, you can see these are not labeled. There's very little markings on these, and so we really don't know what's in them.
So we would have no idea, there's no like breath analyzer, there's no.
Oh, no, that's, I mean, we have drug test kits and things like that, but they're not reliable. They're not 100%, and we have problems with those things with illicit drugs, cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine and things like that. And by the way, kids are vaping that stuff too. So they're crushing up pills and they're putting them in those containers and they're doing that.
Anything you can liquefy.
Yeah, anything you can liquefy, you can do that. They're crushing up the solid pills and putting those in there too and trying them. They're doing goofy things. You had a question too? Did your question get answered? Okay.
And the biggest problem that we try to talk to kids about is more often than not, the kids we catch vaping are not the ones who own the vape. It's the peer pressure, and they're taking something from someone else and putting it in their mouth, and they don't know what they're paying. That's the scariest thing. We try to hit home with them, and they don't realize the severity of that is you don't know what somebody just handed you, and they probably don't know what they bought from an older sibling's friend or from online. And that's the scariest part to us, is that they don't know what they're doing.
Everybody remembers rule number 1 when you go to the bar and you leave your drink. What's that? Get a new one. Okay? It happens that quick. Why would you drink out of something if you let it out of your sight? It's the same thing. Why would you smoke something that you don't know what's going to do to you?
And just as a sidebar to that, communicable diseases are on the rise, and it's coming because people share vapes. You probably didn't share your cigarettes, but people have no hesitation to pass a vape. So anything that can be saliva-based, it's transferred. So, and our public health department is starting to track it, but nationally, we're already seeing the numbers of some of the communicable diseases going up, and they think it's associated with them.
Well, fun information for everybody, right?
Now, that's a time better off.
So what about a hollowed out ink pen? Are they using that, making that a vape device? The Sharpie?
Oh yeah, well, so we had somebody had sent me a picture of a Sharpie that had been hollowed out and the vape was actually put into it. So if you think, I mean, these are just some of the examples that we're showing, that we're seeing. But again, they're always innovative and they're always new and everything like that. I've seen phone cases that are vapes. I've seen, phone cases that are flasks that people will put alcohol in. We have some storage devices up here that look like ordinary things. These are all stash cans. And so, any of your children drink Monster or anything like that, oops.
Sounds like, you open the top, it looks
Who eats
like.
Pringles? Everyone loves Pringles, right? Uh-oh. Now they even get a little more fancy with the water container, the top part.
High school students told me this is called party pop. So when they go into games now, they usually have to have their water tested if they're bringing in their own bottle. Most now schools are tending to go to, you have to purchase there. So you put water in on the top, clear alcohol in the bottom, pot, pills, whatever else you need in the center, and you can walk into the game.
And if there's a
And
whole
this
line
was
of
a
people
high
there,
school student who said this is how he was using it. He would bring it to school, he would have this in class, right? We could have water bottles in class. So.
and if there's a whole line of people, is the person checking in going to be taking a little extra step there to make sure that's going on here? Anybody got little ones, little toddlers, where they keep the Cheerios in the bottom of the sippy cup? And yet the same concept, it's the same exact concept, just easier to carry.
And again, available at any convenience store. I'm telling you, talk to those high school kids. They'll tell you everything, won't they?
Well, I sort of like Elvis.
Yeah.
I feel like they're living their lives like getting buzzed off the jewel pads and then trying to come down on, it's like they're living Elvis, like it's amazing. My son's a sophomore and I've known these kids, I volunteer in school, and the stuff that I'm finding out, he even tells me he's horrified at, the amount of kids that have gone from vaping to pot. Pot is huge. Yep. It's huge. LSD, everything. I'm just like, they're sophomores.
So I always kind of say this, really there's nothing different about this than when we grew up, right? You all can think of kids in your school, you can all think of, maybe it was you, I was the kid most principals would not have wanted around. And so I did dumb things. The difference is the ease that it is with social media, the access and the understanding. If you don't know the best flavor, you go to YouTube. If you don't know how to intensify your high, go to YouTube. We didn't have that. If you weren't in the group that was doing it, you probably didn't learn it. And they had to learn it from someone else before, now it's just boom, and it's there. So it really, the process isn't any different than what we grew up with. It's the intensity and the availability and the knowledge of younger kids. There isn't a fear anymore to teach younger kids this when you're in high school. When I was in high school, you heard the lecture over and over again. You're a role model. You should be making sure you're doing. Whatever you were doing, you didn't share with someone younger. Now, not so much.
There's websites out there that will tell you people will do drugs and either post a video of their reaction or will comment and write about how they felt about whatever substance they took. So there's all kinds of stuff out there, and the problem is that access, and like the woman in the back is saying, get in your kids' lives, find out what they're doing. I'm pretty sure most of your children in here have cell phones, or anyone here that do not. I'm pretty sure you guys pay for that cell phone, so guess whose phone it is? It's yours, and all the content on there is yours. So you can get into there where I see every single text message my daughter sends, every single one. And she deletes stuff, I get a notification that it gets deleted. Any picture she takes, I can see that. So be involved in your children's lives, find out what's going on, talk to them, respect them, don't treat them like they don't know, because they do know. We don't give them enough credit. We don't give them enough credit.
Yeah, they know enough to be dangerous to themselves, you know? They just know enough, not all.
Their brains are developing, but they're really.
Talk about my THC levels, I heard they're level high, they're supposed to go to the brain.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
THC levels, I heard THC levels, I heard they're high, supposed down to go to the brain.
Yeah,
So-
THC changes the structure of the brain. We see that already. There's been a lot of studies done at the 6%, because that's all that's really tested federally. There's reasons for that, but they only test at about 6. I think there's one study out there at 10% right now, but they just don't test at that level. And they already can show the molecular change in the brain. Now, the good news with kids is if we can get them stopped, they have the most resilient brains and they are able to reestablish healthier pathways, but those other ones don't go away, so it always lingers. And it depends on the form of of marijuana that you're using, whether you speed up or slow down.
So I don't know if it'll necessarily slow down, but it definitely alters those pathways. We don't know exactly what it's going to do. Again, this is still relatively new stuff. When you're talking about a 92% THC vape or a 98% dab, we don't know what's going to happen to that. And like I said, each individual is different and it affects everybody's body differently. So there's a lot of things out there that we just don't know. We know it's not good for you for what the very minimal stuff that we have seen.
We've had kids in McHenry County who vaped in class and literally fell out of their chair. That was intense, taken to the hospital in a paranoid state because of what they smoked. And the vape was still in their hands, so we know it was connected. We've had that happen. We have police departments who've shared that with us. And so seizures, we just got an FDA report that seizures are coming up in kids this age, and so they're trying to figure out, does it have an association with vaping?
College campuses, there are people that are going to these vape parties and you're getting multiple people in the emergency room over the weekend, and they're like, what's going on? Oh, you're all from this school? What was going on there this weekend? Was there a rave? Was it ecstasy? Is it MDMA? Is it heroin? What is it? They've tracked it down to being sometimes vapes. It might be a bad vape, you don't know.
So we know we are over a little bit on time, but this board is here for you guys to pull off. It's all Velcro. Look at it, because you won't know what to ask your kids about if you don't know what it is. So look at them, take them apart, do whatever you feel you need to do to be comfortable so that you know what it is. We added charging equipment because sometimes the kids are really good about hiding vapes and forget the charging equipment. And so you might get this as your first sign. So,
And
but we'll
thank
be
you
here.
for coming. I
Yes.
know this isn't a popular conversation, but it's an important one. And thank you to our friends at McHenry